Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Since everything is coming out, I'm trying to understand this for I have this wonderful book from few years in my library called the name is Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace by Lawrence Lessing. I want to read about something about this book. I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to figure out how was this made and now what's happening around the world. And it's in the chapter 4, Architectures of Control. Now we can understand what the controls means in the cyberspace. My aim in the last chapter was to crack one meme about the nature of the net, that the net has a nature, and that its nature is liberty. I argue instead that the nature of the net is set in part by its architectures, and that the possible architectures of cyberspace are many. The values that these architectures embed are different, and one type of difference is regulability, a difference in the ability to control behavior within a particular cyberspace. Some architectures make behavior more regulable. Other architectures make behavior less regulable. These architectures are displacing architectures of liberty. Sounds a little bit crazy, and the humans has to understand now. Okay, this chapter suggests how and why. In a nutshell, the why is commerce, and the how is through architectures that enable identification to enable commerce. As the net is being remade to fit the demands of commerce, architectures are being added to make it serve commerce more efficiently. Regulability will be a byproduct of this change, or, or put differently, the changes that make commerce possible are also changes that will make regulation easy. I don't pick out commerce to pick on commerce. My argument is not that commerce is the enemy, not that there is any necessary connections between commerce and regulability. There is no doubt that commerce will flourish in the future of the internet, and no doubt that is a good thing. The presence of commerce in the net's future, however, does not mean that the net of the future will be the same as the net of the past. Commerce will change the net, and my aim in this chapter is to help us understand how. Identity and authentication, real space. By identity, I mean something more than just who you are. I mean all the facts about you that are true as well. Your identity, in this sense, includes your name, your sex, where you live, what your education is, your driver license number, your social security number, your purchase on Amazon, whether you're a lawyer, and so on. Authentication is a process by which aspects of your identity become known. Some become known when you reveal them. Others become known whether you choose to reveal them or not. Perfect authentication would mean that others know for certain all the facts about you. Happiness comes from others knowing a good deal less. In real space, much about your identity is revealed whether you want it revealed or not. Many of the facts about you, that is, are automatically asserted and authenticating. This is a fact about real space life. If I walk into a bank, the teller will know a lot about me even if I don't say a thing. He will know I am a puffy, middle-aged white guy with glasses and blondish hair. He will know I'm not big and not strong, though I am somewhat tall. He will know all this whether I want to tell him or not. I could, in principle, try to hide some of these facts. I could put on a mask, walk on stilts, and try to enter the bank incognito. But if I did, I would be more likely to get tackled by a security guard than to hide in a future about myself. Hiding usually does not hide itself very well. Usually, we reveal that we are hiding. Other facts about me, however, are not automatically asserted or automatically self authenticating. Some facts you can learn only if I tell you. I broke my leg when I was 6. Some you cannot authenticate without restoring to some other source credentials. The police officer wants a driver license, not your word that you are authorized to drive. A law school wants a copy of your college transcripts, not a letter from you telling them that you graduated at the top of your class. A bank wants the deed on your house, not just a promise that you will repay the mortgage. In all these cases, facts about you must be authenticated by a document, and hence by an institution that stands behind the document. Real Space Life does carries with its this mix of authenticating and authenticated credentials. Social life is a constant negotiation between these different credentials. In a small town, in a quieter time, documents as credentials were not terribly necessary. You will know by your face, and your face carried with it a reference held in the common knowledge of the community about your character. As life becomes more anonymous, social institutions must construct credentials to authenticate facts about you that in an early time or in a smaller social world, would have been authenticated by the knowledge of the community about who you are. The point may be obvious. The regulability of real space life depends on these credentials. The fact that witnesses can identify who committed a crime, either because they know the person or because of self-authenticating features such as he was a white male, 6 feet tall, enhances the ability of the state to regulate against that crime. If criminals were invisible or witnesses had no memory, crime would increase. The fact that fingerprints are hard to change and can now be traced to convicted felons increase the likelihood that felonies will caught again. Relying on a more changeable physical characteristics would reduce the ability of the police to track repeat offenders. The fact that cars have license plates and are registered by their owners increases the likelihood that a hit-and-run driver will be caught. Without licenses and without system registering owners, it would be extremely difficult to track car-related crime. In all these cases, and in many more, features of real space life making regulating real space life possible. The state, as one regulator, that depends on these features being as they are. Often the state will intervene, either to ensure that these credentials remain usable as credentials or to substitute new credentials when an early credentials become useless. The state punishes counterfeiters of state documents as a way of increasing the reliability of state documents. The states issue other credentials, driver license, to increase the reliability of its verification. This then is the nature of real space regulation. Much about who we are is revealed, and we have built institutions that can credential what cannot authentically be revealed. Both social life and state regulation depend on this mix, and both react as elements within this mixed change. Identity and authentication cyberspace. Identity and authentication in cyberspace are different. The internet is built on a simple suite of protocols, the basis TCP/IP suite. The TCP/IP suite includes protocols for exchanging packets of data between two machines on the net. I explored this idea in a greater detail in Chapter 8. For now, think of the packet as a small package of information wrapped in an envelope with an address stamped on the outside. To exchange these packets, the system needs at least 2 bits of data: the address of the machine from which the data are being sent, and the address of the machine to which the data are being sent. These are called Internet Protocol address. They look like this: 128.34.35.204. Simplified brutally, a packet of data is carried to and from these addresses as it works its way across the internet. These protocols, however, reveal nothing about the user of the internet and very little about the data being exchanged. Although the IP address is sufficient to move the data from one machine to another, it has no necessary connections to any physical unit in the world. IP addresses are virtual addresses. The virtual can change, nor do the IP protocols tell us much about the data being sent. In particular, they do not tell us who sent the data, from where the data were sent, to where geographically the data are going, for what purpose the data are going there, or what kind of data they are. None of this is known by the system, or knowable by simply by looking at the data. From the perspective of the network, this other information is unnecessary surplus, like a daydreaming postal worker. The network simply moves the data and leaves interpretation of the data to the applications at either end. This minimalism design is intentional. It reflects both a political decision about disable control and technological decision about the optimal network design. The designers were not interested in advancing social control. They were concerned with network efficiency. Thus, this design pushed complexity out of the basic internet protocols, leaving it to the applications or ends to incorporate any sophistication that a particular service may require. When this basic protocol is translated into internet access, when, for instance, you are browsing a web page, this minimal identification means that the server delivering the web page knows nothing about you from the internet protocol itself. We will consider later how it does learn things about you from other applications that sit on top of the internet protocol. The web server simply knows that you are located on the internet at the IP address and that you are coming onto the net with the TCP/IP compliant protocol. It is as if you were in a carnival funhouse with the lights dimmed to darkness and voices coming from around you, but from people you do not know and from the places you cannot identify. The system knows that there are entities out there interacting with it, but it knows nothing about who those entities are. Whereas in real space, and here is the important point, anonymity has to be created. In cyberspace, anonymity is the giving. Identity and authentication regulability. This difference between the architectures or identity in real space and the cyberspace has profound consequences for the regulability of behavior in cyberspace. If regulation hangs upon identity, that is, on knowing at least something about a person being regulated, then in cyberspace, under TCP/IP is designed, there is very little that the regulator would necessarily know. Unlike a real space, cyberspace reveals no self-authenticating facts about identity. In real space, you reveal your sex, your age, how you look, what language you speak, whether you can see, whether you can hear, how intelligent you are. In cyberspace, you reveal only an address, and one that has no necessary relationship to anything else about you. The absence of self-authenticating facts in cyberspace reduces its regulability. If an state, for example, wants to regulate obscenity or control children's access to indecent speech, the internet architecture provides no help. Both data and people are unidentified in this world, and while it is often possible to make good guesses, it is also easy to make good guesses impossible. With the internet architecture of Net 95, it is easy to hide who you are. Perhaps more important, it is difficult to assert facts about your identity in a credible way. On the internet, it's both easy to hide that you are a dog and hard to prove that you are not. All this is true under one architecture of the internet. Claims about the difference between real space and cyberspace depends on this difference in design. The lesson of the last chapter, however, was that architectures could be different. We could imagine different architectures that would better help us identify who individuals are and authenticate other facts about them. In the balance of this chapter, I want to introduce one such architecture. I will consider questions about its use of justification, its possible threats to privacy or anonymity, or the likelihood of its becoming a dominant architecture. In later chapters, my aim here is to convince you that there are such architectures and to sketch the regulability that such an architecture would permit. Architectures of identification. How then could we layer architectures of identity onto the existing identity ignorant architectures of TCP/IP? Consider three common techniques used today to identify someone on the internet. There are others, and the description of these three will not be complete, but a sketch of these three reveals two features of a past technology that will be central to the architectures of identification that the net is now building. The first technique is a password. You have an account on a system. The account has your account name and password. When you access the system, you must provide both bits of information. The combination is what verifies that you are authorized to use the system. There are any number of examples of identification of this sort. American Online, AOL is a well-known one. You must type in a password associated with a particular screen name before you can enter AOL. Lexis, a provider of online legal resources, is a second. True, Lexis requires only a single password, not an account name as well, to enter. Use of the database are then charged to the password. A password system has no advantage and a disadvantage. The main advantage is its security, at least as long as the user keeps his or her password secret. The disadvantage is cost and the inconvenience of continually using passwords to move from one space to another. If every site on the net requires some sort of password, then surfing would be as tedious as crossing Manhattan during Friday rush hours. A second and much cruder system avoids this inconvenience. This system uses a verification through a cookie, a small entry made by your browser to a cookie file on your hard disk that all allows a site to know who you are. When you first purchase a book from Amazon.com and establish an account, for example, Amazon.com server places an entry in your cookie file. When you return to that site, your browser sends the cookie along with the request for the site. The server can then send you preferences according to your account. Amazon.com can recommend books for you to buy, given the pattern of purchases you have made before. The main advantage in this system is its seamless verification. Unless you have your browser set to notify you of cookie exchanges, you can surf through sites that deposit and consume cookies with little interruption. The disadvantage is the danger that your cookie file could be manipulated or even copied to other systems. It could also provide a key with which provider can learn about you. If a common cookie identifies you across a number of sites because these sites have subscribed, for example, to a common tracking system, then in principle, if you have revealed information about yourself in one of those places, the other places could know it as well. Cookies are less secure than passwords, though of course they are doing something very different. This difference does not mean they are useless. The security we need is a function of the risk we are protecting against. Certainly, the NCA should not use cookies as the system for granting access to databanks of national secrets, but there is no reason why a portal site like Yahoo should not use cookies to figure out who you are and to give you the news that you have previously selected. You have little incentive to lie about this. Yahoo has little reason to care if you do, with so little at stake. An unobtrusive, if insecure system is perfectly adequate. A third technology would marry the benefits of the first two. This is the technology of digital signatures, which enables digital certificates, a kind of passport of the internet. They would authenticate any type of information about a machine, and if unlocked by a passphrase or biometric device, about you, your name, your citizenship, your age, whether you are a lawyer. While the details of the architecture are many, suffice it for now to define them as an encrypted digital object that can be used to authenticate facts about someone. Digital certificates will reside on your computer under at least some design. A server would automatically and invisible check the certificate as you enter the site. If you held the right certificate, you would be let in, and as you were let in, the server would then know the certified facts about you. It would know, that is, that you were a man, or that you came from Canada, or that you were over the age of 25. And it could do or know all this without ever asking you anything at all. Certificates could become the kind of self-authenticating credential that we know in real space. But unlike in real space, there would be no limit to the fact a certificate could certify. Digital certificates would make possible a secure system of identification that could operate as seamlessly as cookies, but with much more data certified. They rely, however, on technologies of cryptography. To see how, we must take a detour into the working of cryptography, and then consider again how this technology could be molded to the form of identification. Cryptography, confidentiality versus authentication. Here is something that will sound very extreme, but is at most, I think, a slight exaggeration. Encryption technology are the most important technological breakthrough in the last 1,000 years. No other technological discovery, from nuclear weapons. I hope that the internet will have a more significant impact on social and political life. Cryptography will change everything. I say this not because I have the space in this book, or ability in any case, to prove this claim to you. I say this to emphasize it's not important that you understand the underlying technologies, though it would be great if more people did. What is important is that you get a hint of the purposes to which these technologies can be turned and the consequences of their power. Cryptography is a Janus facet. It has an ambiguous relationship to freedom on the internet. As Stuart Baker and Paul Hurst put it, cryptography surely is the best of technologies and the worst of technologies. It will stop crimes and it will create new crimes. It will undermine dictatorships and it will drive them to the new excesses. It will make us all anonymous and it will track your every transaction. Cryptography can be all these things, both good and bad, because encryption can serve two fundamentally different ends. In its confidentiality function, it can be used to keep communication secret. In its identification function, it can be used to provide forgery-proof digital identities. It thus enables freedom from regulation as it enhances confidentiality, but it can also enable regulation as it enhances identification. Its traditional use is secrets. Encrypt a message, and only those with the proper key can open and read it. This type of encryption has been around as long as language itself, but until the mid-1970s, it suffered from an important weakness. the same key that was used to encrypt a message was also used to decrypt it. So if you lost that key, all the message hidden with that key were also rendered vulnerable. If a large number of messages were encrypted with the same key, losing the key compromised the whole archive of secrets protected by the key. This risk was significant. You always had to transport the key needed to unlock the message, and inherent in that transcript was the risk that the key would be lost. In the mid-1970s, however, a breakthrough in encryption technique was announced by two computer scientists, Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman. Rather than relying on a single key, the Diffie-Hellman system used two keys, one public, the other private. What's encrypted with one can be decrypted only with the other. Even with one key, there is no way to infer the other. This discovery was the clue to an architecture that could build an extraordinary range of confidence in any network. Whether or not the physical network itself was secure, even if the wires are tapped, this type of encryption still archives its magic. We can get a hint of how, in a series of cases whose accumulating impact makes the potential clear. 8. If I want to send a message to you that I know only you will be able to read, I can take your public key and use it to encrypt that message. Then I can send that message to you knowing that only the holder of the private key, presumably you, will be able to read it. But you cannot be sure it is I who sent you this message, because anyone can encrypt a message using your public key and then send it to you. You have no way to be certain that I was the one who sent it. Therefore, consider the next example. B. Before I send the message I have encrypted with your public key, I can encrypt it with my private key. Then when you receive the message from me, you can first decrypt it with my public key, and then decrypt it again with your private key. After first decryption, you can be sure that I, or the holder of my private key, was the one who sent your message. After the second decryption, you can be sure that only you or other holders of your private key actually read the content of the message. But how do you know that what I say is the public key or Larry Lessing is actually the public key or Larry Lessing? How can you be sure that the public key you are using is actually the public key it purports to be? Here is where the next example comes in. C. If there is a trustworthy third party, say my bank or the Federal Reserve Board or the ACLU with a public key, a fact I am able to verify because of the prominence of the institution, and the third party verifies that the public key of a Larry Lessing is actually the public key of a Larry Lessing, then along with my message sent to you, encrypted first in your public key and second in my private key, would be a certificate issued by an institution itself encrypted with the institution private key. When you receive the message, you can use the institution's public key to decrypt the certificate. Take from the certificate my public key, which you now are fairly confident is my public key. Decrypt the message I send you with the key held in the certificate, after which you are fairly confident comes from me. And then decrypt the message encrypted with your public key, which you can be fairly confident no one else has read. If we did all that, you would know that I am who I say I am, and that the message was sent by me. I would know that only you read the message, and you would know that no one else read the message along the way. I could add any number of complications. For example, how can I be certain that you are who you say you are? Clue: the same way you can be certain that I am who I say I am. And I have hidden a number of important simplifications. For example, it turns out that it is simpler not to encrypt the whole message with a dual key system, but rather to encrypt only a symmetric key. using a dual key system. My aim, however, is simple: to outline the basic elements of this architecture: a system of dual or asymmetric encryption, and system of trusted third parties that can certify facts about you. The world I am describing would have both of these elements automatically and seamlessly executed. The encryption I've been describing is called public key encryption, again because it has two keys, one public, one private, unlike traditional single key encryption. As the last step of this encryption process makes clear, the system depends on an infrastructure, not an infrastructure of special wires or protect pathways, but an infrastructure of trust, which can provide not perfect confidence, but enough confidence through the multiplication of assertions about authenticity to make it certain enough that the fact certified by a particular signature is true. An infrastructure that supports a public key system is called PKI, public key infrastructure. The first point to see is the potential that a well-established PKI creates. With a robust PKI, the possibilities for identification become extraordinary. Individuals could carry certificates that authenticate any number of facts about themselves: who they are, personal attributes, age, citizenship, sex, marital status, sexual orientation, HIV status, professional credentials, college degrees, VAR certification, and so on. These certificates could reside on their personal computers, and when they attempted to enter an internet site, that site would check the certificate and let them pass if they held the proper certificate. It would deny access if they did not. A world with a robust PKI would enable unlimited range of chip authentication and hence an unlimited range of zoning, of conditioning access to internet sites based on the credentials held by the user. But only if. Whether such an architecture will come to exist is a different question. Systems close to this are already being developed, though none operate as generally as I've just described. The dominant model of certificates today is identification certificates that verify that you are who you say you are, as described by VeriSign, the current leader issuing digital certificates. Think of digital IDs as the electronic equivalent of driver license or passports that reside in your internet browser and email software. They contain information that uniquely identifies you and allow you to digitally sign a message so your recipient knows that a message really comes from you. Encrypt a message so you intended recipient can decrypt and read its contents and attachments. By digitally signing and encrypting your email, you can ensure that your confidential message and attachment are protected from tampering, impersonation, and eavesdropping. But verifying a user identity is only the first part of the architecture I am describing. Any model limited to identity will have limited appeal. Business do not really care that I am able to certify that I am Larry Lessing, and Larry Lessing works for Harvard. What they want to know is whether I have the authority to purchase 50,000 computers for Harvard if they receive from me an order for 50,000 computers, or whether a certain loan officer authorized to commit to a certain size loan, or others want to know whether a representative is actually authorized to make a specific commitment. In short, what's desired is more flexible system of certification, a system that allows people to certify any sort of fact or statement that they would want to make. So, for example, if I am authorized to purchase computer equipment for Harvard Law School would give me a certificate that authenticates that fact. Someone would in turn certify that certificate I hold from Harvard Law School is a fact certificate from Harvard Law School, and the micro warehouse receives an email with an order for 50,000 computers, it would automatically work through the system of certification to confirm the order. This more flexible system is the kernel of an architecture of identity that would render cyberspace regulable. The architecture would allow you to certify any fact or statement about yourself to which you could get a third party to attest. In principle, you could hold a credential for every aspect of your identity. Every fact about yourself that you wanted to authenticate, from your age all the way down to the grade you got in spelling in the second grade. As Michael Fromkin suggests, Lily Tomlin's jokes, it will be a mark on your permanent record that will follow you for the rest of your life. It's no longer a joke. Depending how much you trust the third party, the certification would allow you, as the skeptical used to believe, the person making the assertion. But again, why would we expect this system to develop? What benefit would it produce? And who stands to gain from this benefit? I believe responsibility at the foot of internet commerce. What needs of internet commerce would push us to a certificate-rich architecture? The controls for commerce. The internet was built for research, not commerce. Indeed, until 1991, the National Science Foundation forbade its use for commerce. Its protocols were open and insecure. It was not designed to hide. Data transmitted over his net could easily be intercepted and stolen. Confidential data could not easily be protected. Early users did not seem to mind this drawback. If secrecy was important, they were quite capable of encrypting a message. And for most communication, security was not important. In this world, the ethic was openness, and openness was affordable. But commerce is not so laid back. At first, vendors were quite anxious about online transactions. Credit card companies initially did not want their numbers used in cyberspace, at least not until cyberspace changed. From the start, commerce has pushed for changes in the architectures of the net to enable more secure and safe commerce. Of course, there is nothing new about this or about commerce on the wires. As Jen Wynn puts it, electronic commerce is arguable as old as the telegraph. The 1970s saw a vast increase in closed architecture systems that use the wires, either proprietary or not, to exchange data or to facilitate commerce. The significance of the recent birth of e-commerce is that it takes place on an open, unsecure network. The challenge for commerce on the early net was to develop architectures that, while sharing in the network advantage of the internet, would restore some of the security that commerce requires. A kind of open system, security was needed, and the most successful early example was Netscape's Secure Socket Layer SSL protocol. Beginning with the Netscape Enterprise Server 2.0, secure servers could exchange encrypting transactional information with internet browser clients. For example, when you could send your credit card number across the net, another UNAR Visa would have to worry that it would be intercepted and republished. The great advantage of SSL was its simplicity and economy. Benefit is gained by mixing the best of two different encryption key techniques, symmetric and asymmetric encryption algorithms. The advantage of symmetric encryption is efficiency. It's easier for the computer to decrypt using a symmetric key. The disadvantage is security. You have to pass the symmetric key around, and sometimes it gets lost. The advantage of a symmetric or public key encryption is security. You do not have to pass around a private key and risk the loss of the key. The disadvantage is efficiency. It takes a lot of computing power to decrypt a symmetrical encrypted message. SSL mixes these two techniques by encrypting the symmetric key asymmetrically. Once encrypted, the symmetric key is safe to use on an insecure network. But because a key is relatively small, it's not a terrible computational burden to decrypt it on the other side. By using asymmetric encryption to protect the key, there is no danger that the key will be revealed in a transmission. But by using a symmetric key to encrypt all other data exchange, the computational burden on both sides is reduced. The trouble with the SSL, however, is that it is trustworthy only if you can trust the merchant on the other side. Your information is not like to leak in the transmission from client to server, but if the owner of the server is not to be trusted, then the risk you should worry about is not to leak the pipeline. Other protocols have been proposed to deal with the problem of the untrustworthy merchant, the most prominent of which is the Secure Electronic Transaction SET protocol. SET is a standard adopted by a consortium of credit card companies for exchanging credit card data to facilitate greater security, using a protocol that is still simply sits on top of the basic Ether protocol. With SET, you can be confident that your credit card number will not be overheard and that the merchant could not misuse your number. These two protocols are just the first steps in constructing an architecture of security for e-commerce. Though SET may be a misstep developed by committee, it is a standard that has proven too complicated to implement effectively. There are significant improvements, but they do not represent the real change to come. For e-commerce to develop fully, the net will need a far more general architecture of trust, an architecture that makes possible secure and private transactions. The elements of any such architecture are summarized well by J. Lee Grant. This architecture would have to provide first authentication to ensure the identity of the person you are dealing with. Second, authorization to ensure that the person is sanctioned for a particular function. Third, privacy to ensure that others cannot see what exchange they are. 4. Integrity to ensure that the transmission is not altered en route. And 5. Non-repudiation to ensure that the sender of a message cannot deny that he sent it. In real space, we achieve each of these elements through familiar real space architecture of trust. So familiar have this become that we are likely not only to forget the efforts originally made to erect some of them, but also to ignore the future of real space that makes sense architecture possible. It's usually obvious if an envelope has been opened, if a signature has been changed, we can usually tell. People will not self-authenticate, since we can recognize them when they come into a store. If we do not know them, we can check a driver license or the validity of their credit card. Possessing a valid credit card is another kind of self-authentication, though obviously an imperfect one. We check authorization with the structures such as purchase orders or letters of introduction. We protect privacy by using secure envelopes, and we protect integrity by checking for evidence of tampering on a letter that has been received. We use system of certified exchange, certified mail, warranty delivered to avoid the problem of repudiation of receipt or sending. These architectures in real space become invisible to us, but they are obviously constructed, and just as obviously they are expensive to construct. This is the difficult Russia faces now. If e-commerce is to develop, we must erect equivalent architecture in cyberspace. Commerce will have to develop ways to provide vendors with sufficient security in online transactions while minimizing the burden of that security. Again, the core of any such architecture will be tools of encryption and PKI. The core would permit the authentication of a digital certificate that verifies facts about you, your identity, citizenship, sex, age, or the authority you hold. And while you could erect an architecture of certification today, there are private certificate servers that we could use to issue certificates covering any conceivable fact the system would not support e-commerce until the certificates were part of a general public key infrastructure that permitted secure and trustworthy communication with anyone on the net. An architecture that contains all of these elements would provide an e-commerce with a security greater than the best security in a real space. My view is that online commerce will not fully develop until such an architecture is established. There are many plans for deploying this architecture. Some imagine the government as the certified authority. Others imagine trusted third parties like banks in that role. Any number of paths are possible. The key to all of this, however, is not the government requires people to hold such IDs. The key instead is incentives, systems that build the incentives for individuals voluntarily to hold IDs. When architectures accommodate users who come with an ID installed and make life difficult for users who refuse to bear an ID, certification will spread quickly. Cookies have spread not just this way, because many people are concerned with this privacy implication of cookies. Browsers have enabled users to choose whether to accept them. With one click, you can disable the deposit of cookies and so prevent the owner of a website from selling information about you. But this privacy comes at cost. Users who choose this option are either unable to use areas of the net where cookies are required or forced constantly to choose whether a cookie will be deposited. Most find the hassle to create and simply accept cookies on their machine. We will see a similar development with digital IDs. Life will be easier for those who carry ID than for those who do not. Survey will make exchange cheaper or simpler. If data can be authenticated, just as it is easier to accept cookies automatically, so too will be it easier to authenticate facts about yourself. Life in an authenticating world will be simpler for those who authenticate. If the system spreads with incentives, then we can see why commerce is so good at spreading the system. Commerce has an incentive itself to increase the authentication and certification of transactions in cyberspace, and it is a good position to give incentives to consumers. Incentives are commerce's best tool for regulation, and commerce is fairly good at deploying them. Nonetheless, there is room for skepticism. No doubt there will be a significant hurdles for the community to overcome as competitors fix on standards that provide a sufficiently robust yet flexible exchange. No doubt there are lots of reasons to wonder whether this infrastructure or security can develop on its own. In my view, we can see enough to be confident that it is already developing. Technologies that build encryption into the background of an application are becoming common. Networks rapidly integrating digital signatures, and a host of companies called certificate authorities now provide digital certificates. You do not have to believe in the invisible hand to be convinced that this infrastructure of trust is coming. Even if you doubt that private interests alone could achieve this coordination, another factor suggests that the character of the net is about to flip. If commerce alone cannot succeed in establishing these architectures, government is in a strong position to bring about just the changes that commerce needs. The government can help commerce. How it does so is the subject of the chapter that follows. Well, I share this chapter so to everybody be aware of everything, investigate, and be part of the revolution in everything. That's it for today. In the future, we'll share more about this book. Was in my library. Bye bye.